We were told globalization would make everything cheaper, but now we can't afford energy. We don't make anything ourselves, and we're begging foreign suppliers just to keep the lights on. Was this the biggest economic mistake of the last 50 years? For decades, UK politicians like Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss told us that the market knows best, that globalization would bring cheaper goods, open markets and international corporations. Countries like the UK outsourced, imported and offshored, all in the name of efficiency. But now it feels like the world is crumbling. Energy prices are volatile, supply chains are fragile, and nationalist politics, the kind we thought we left in the past, is suddenly back on the menu. And today, in this episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest, we're going to ask, why is economic nationalism making a comeback in the West? And has globalization quietly failed? But first, let's take a look back to the 1990s and the early 2000s. In the West, you had Clinton in America and Blair in the UK, who clearly embraced a vision: open borders, free trade, and international integration. The idea was simple. If every country specialises in what it does best, and we trade freely with each other, then we all get richer and war becomes less likely. And in theory it worked. You got cheap energy from Europe, cheap manufacturing from China, and faster innovation through global tech collaboration. But there was a catch. In pursuing efficiency, domestic production was hollowed out, steel outsourced, energy imported, and manufacturing was moved to the lowest bidder. And everything became about price and not about resilience. And there's one flaw that no one wanted to admit. The free market works until it doesn't. Because when geopolitical tensions rise, like Russia invading Ukraine, the global supply chain starts to crack. Energy prices spiked, import routes stalled. Nations that outsourced essential industries now found themselves trapped, dependent on foreign suppliers with different values, different laws, and different agendas. Take the UK, for example. Instead of building long-term energy independence with wind, solar, or even domestic oil, it bought cheap gas from Europe and beyond. Why? Because producing it here was more expensive. And why was that? In the UK, you've got minimum wage laws, environmental regulations, and stricter labour protections. And so the UK, once a global empire of industry, became a buyer, no longer a maker. When COVID hit, and then war returned to Europe, globalism's flaws were exposed. Suddenly, every country started asking, what can we make at home again? And with that question came a political shift. Nationalist rhetoric, once dismissed as outdated, began to sound like common sense to voters. Let's bring manufacturing jobs back. Let's build our own energy systems, and let's stop depending on countries that we can't trust. In the return of economic sovereignty wrapped in the language of nationalism. And politicians from Trump to Le Pen to Sunak are riding that wave. In some ways, it's a step backward, a rejection of decades of open markets, but in others, it's a desperate correction to a system that stopped working for ordinary people. In reality, globalism was built for peaceful, stable times. It works when nations cooperate, when prices stay low and supply chains are smooth. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like that world exists anymore. Now we live in a world of energy warfare, resource competition, trade blackmail, and technological arms races. And because we relied so heavily on the cheapest supplier, the UK has no backup plan. Ironically, in chasing cheap goods and low inflation, we destroyed our capacity to withstand shocks, because globalism was a devil we didn't know. We knew the prices were good, but we didn't realise how dangerous the dependency was. And now that nationalism is rising again, we have to ask, what does it cost? Will reshoring manufacturing be expensive? Will producing energy locally raise prices in the short term? And does national self-sufficiency require long-term investment, not short-term profits? But here's the point. It might be worth it, Because nationalism today isn't about waving flags, it's about building systems that you can actually control. Not for ideology, not for market, but because the market left alone built something fragile, and people are tired of the fragility. I know some will say that the rise of nationalism in the West is just about culture or immigration, and to a lot of people it probably is. But largely it's about control. Control over energy, control over food, and control over production. For decades, we were told the best supply was the cheapest, no matter where it came from. But now we're learning the cheapest option might cost you when things go wrong. So maybe, just maybe, the devil we knew, the domestic industries we abandoned, deserve a second look. Because in a world of geopolitical chaos, being dependent might be the most expensive mistake of all.